Hi guys, welcome to the studio. My name is Allison Jensen and I'm the owner of the Orange Easel School of Art, and I am here today to do some watercolor painting with you. Now if it's your first time joining us, I want to let you know that we are a children's art studio here downtown Liberty. We've got another location over in the Platte Woods area, and we are smack dab in our summer programming schedule. I've got Dollhouse Camp going off in the door right behind me, and they are wrapping up their day one. I know Platte Woods has the same thing going on. It's actually our last week of June classes, and then we move into July. So, but we've been coming live every single Monday through Friday to give you different like tips and tricks and invitations that you can do at home if maybe you can't make it to the art studio. So we're trying to make sure everyone has a creative summer. Today we're going to be painting with watercolor paints, which is one of my favorites. So people who know me know, like, I adore watercolors. This is my thing. And I got to teach a class last Friday that, let me remove that notification. I got to teach a class last Friday that used watercolors and lettering. It was so much fun. So I'm just going to show you a little tutorial on how to paint. I'll show you little rainbow leaves. See? We won't do the lettering that I did on there, but we'll do the little rainbow leaves. So I want to show you how to do those. And I'll talk about the supplies that you're going to need and all of that jazz. So you can follow along with me at home, but if for some reason you just want to watch, you can always catch the replay later when you've actually got your supplies handy and with you. If you're catching the replay, please feel free to say hi to me. I do check all of the comments, and you can always, come back and reference this video. We're going to archive all of them on our blog as well. So that's not the one I need. This is the one I need. All right, so the supplies you're going to need some watercolors. Now the ones I'm using are just from Michael's. I know you've seen them before. We use them in the studio constantly. They're so economical. They're great for home use. They're not very messy. These are just a regular tray pan watercolors. They're made by Artist Loft. They do have a cover on them, but we totally just take them off. But they have really great vibrant colors. They last a long time, and they're very durable with kids. So they're easy. Like if the yellow gets really muddied, they're easy to like clean. The drawback of kind of a less expensive watercolor is that it's going to have a little bit of a chalkiness to it when it dries. So it's not quite as translucent as a more expensive watercolor. You're going to get kind of a chalkiness. If you build it up too thick, it will actually flake off of your watercolor paper. So so that's just the drawback, but the positives outweigh the cons. So use whatever you got. I love all the colors that are in this one. Look at that. How fun is that? I'll still mix colors, but I love them. I've got 2 jars of water. And when I paint with watercolors, I always try to have 2 jars. One of them is my clean water and one of them is my dirty water. So this one here, this is the one that I'll use to wash my brush. So if I'm changing colors, I'll use this one to wash off my brush and then dry it on the towel. And then this one is the one that I will use to like hydrate the colors on here, especially if I'm using a light color, because I don't want to take this stuff and hydrate this pretty yellow, right? And when I say hydrate, you know what I mean? Like this is dry and chalky and I have to drop water on it and stir it up in order for it to work. I don't want to do that with this water. This is my dirty water. That would change the color of my yellow. So I will always try to use the clean water when I hydrate my paints. It's also really nice to have a clean jar of water handy when you're painting with watercolors because, well, 2 reasons. One, if you ever want to like drop water into your paint to make it move or just to rehydrate your paint that's actually on your picture, you want clean water to do that. And the other reason is water is your eraser when you're doing watercolors. So if you make a mark and it runs away from you, because watercolor does that, you can actually wipe it up with a paper towel and then use water to erase it. So you always want to have your clean water jar there. And then I will mix them up. And by the end of it, sometimes both of them are dirty, but I try really hard to keep one clean and one dirty. All right. And then sometimes I've got like a coffee mug on the table too, and then it gets really confusing. My brush ends up in my coffee mug and it's a whole thing, you guys. So this is my paint palette that I'm using, and I've got my 2 jars of water. I will tip the camera down here in just a second, I promise. And this is my watercolor brush that I'm using. It is not anything fancy. It's not a really expensive brush. I do have some really expensive brushes. You don't need really expensive brushes. You can see it's kind of a middle-sized brush. I think it's technically like a number 6. There's no standard that I can find for numbering brushes, but this one was a number 6 when we ordered it. It's probably about just a little less than 1/4 of an inch in thickness at the metal part, and it is a round brush. Now, watercolorists, they have different preferences in brushes, and I really believe that brushes, more than anything else, are just an artist preference. So I almost always paint with rounds. Doesn't matter. I rarely use a flat or a filbert or anything. I will almost always use a brown brush. So that's what we're using today. So I got my round. You do want to make sure it comes to a nice point. That's the most important thing. With the technique that I'm going to teach today, it needs to come up to a nice point. If you got it at a point and then it's got like, you know, like strands that are kind of like going everywhere, that's not going to work. So make it a nice point. And you know how to take care of your brushes so that they stay in a nice point, you guys? One is to make sure you don't smash it into the paper so that it doesn't kind of bend the brushes here. The other way is when you clean your brush, when you wash it, you want to take a little bit of soap and just kind of form it back into that point and let it dry just like that. Okay? And that soap cast, you know, that happens on the bristles, kind of like how my gel cast happens on my hair. That cast will stay and it'll protect the brush when it goes into storage and stuff like that. And then it just washes off when you put it in the jar the first time. Okay? But that'll keep your brushes a little bit nicer. Cool? And I got my paper towels, because you got to have paper towels when you paint with watercolors. Cool? All right. Come here. Let's tip you down so you can see what we're about to do. Ooh. Get a little lower. Get a little lower. Get a little higher. I love watercolors, you guys. These are so fun. And I know people that really struggle with them because you can't control them like you do acrylics. But they're so fluid and beautiful if you can just let go. That's the hard part. All right, this is my paper that I have. It is a 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. It is our preference to use in the studio. It is not the really expensive stuff. It is made by Canson, which is a student grade paper. You can, they do make a 90-pound, which is even cheaper. I don't recommend it because you're going to see a lot more wrinkles and bubbles when you paint on it. So 140-pound is as low as we go. And I personally, as an artist, prefer a cold press versus a hot press. Again, it's a preference, although most people that I know paint on cold press. And it does look different. It does act different. So you just have to, you know, just got to learn. You got to practice. All right, so here's my paints. Here's my paper. You'll notice I set everything to my right-hand side. Let me turn a little bit so you can see me. I set everything to my right, so I've got my jars. Hang on, I'll show you. I got my jars of water, I got my paper towels, and I got my paints. And it's all to my right-hand side because I am right-handed. So when I go over here to my paints and I get my paint, I'm going to come over here to my paper. If I have to reach over the opposite direction, it's harder for me, and it's more likely that I'm going to drip things all over my painting, and I don't want that. Okay? Everybody can see okay? Everybody can hear okay, right? Y'all are good? Excited to see some watercolor painting? On this one here, I'm just going to show you the technique that we're going to learn for painting these leaves, and then we'll get into kind of the rainbowness of it, okay? And we'll maybe paint a picture. I've got a second sheet of paper over here that will do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my brush in some water so that it's loaded up and wet and juicy, and I'm going to grab a color, and since we're doing leaves, I'll go straight into some green, nice and dark, so that way you can see what I'm doing. Now that's not quite enough water for me, so I'm going to go back in, grab some more water, and get a little bit more. Once my palette is hydrated a little bit, I probably won't have to double dip like that, but it's pretty dry, guys. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm loading up my brush, all right, and I want it so that it is full and juicy is what I usually tell people, full and juicy, not dripping. If it's oversaturated and I can't hold it over this paper without it falling, then I've got too much. But I also don't want it to be dry. I don't want to run out of paint. All right, so here's what, and everybody grips their brush differently. I hold mine like a pencil sometimes and then other times not. But the technique that I'm going to use, very similar to what we did in hand lettering, is applying different pressures as I pull my brush back to make my leaf. So if I tickle it really, really lightly, it makes a skinny line. And if I flatten it and I squish it into the page and then I pull up again, I get a leaf. You see that? So all I did was, I'll do it one more time. We're going to tickle, tickle, tickle. Whoops, a little too much paint. If you get too much paint, that first time you drop your brush on your paper, it will end up like it'll release too much and you'll get a glob. So tickle, 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 flatten it out, pull up with less pressure, we get our point. Okay, now obviously I can change my leaf shape, right, if I don't pull so far. I can change my leaf shape if I don't press so hard in the middle, right? So I can vary it based on all of those variables. How far I'm going to pull, how hard I'm going to press down, all that stuff. So let me wash my brush real quick. While this one's wet, I'm going to go ahead and grab some of this really light green and watch what happens if I put a little light green in there. You can't see that. Come here. So I got a little bit of light green in this one. Whoops, it didn't like when I did that, you guys. It was like, don't rotate your device like that. If I put light green inside my watercolor here, it starts to run and bleed together. Now this leaf here is dry, so I can't do that. You can only do it when they're wet. So like this one's wet, so let's do that one. And we'll do a color you'll be able to see. This is like a ochre orange color. Watch. See how it moves in there? Now, that ochre orange has red in it. And my red and my green are complementary colors, which means they will make kind of a muddied brown when they come together. I like that. I think it's a really natural and it's a fun look to kind of throw in complementary colors. But if you don't like that, you could have gone with something that was next to it on the color wheel, like blue or yellow, which is what we did over here. All right, let's do this kind of leaf. So this one is just a single pull. This one here gets a little bit more complicated. Can you see? That one is actually two pulls together. So that's the next one we'll do. We're learning two different ways. Whoops, Miss Sarah's sending me messages. We'll just ignore her and I'll get back to her in a minute. Two different ways to paint leaves. All right. Let's do pink. Want to do a pink? So I load up my brush. That's what I'm doing. I know you can't see it over here because I zoomed in, but I'm loading up my brush really good. All right. The problem a lot of people have with watercolors is they don't use enough water to really loosen up the paint, especially with the cakes. You don't have that problem as much when you work with liquids, but you can't have it be too dry. Okay, so watch this one. So this time I'm going to pull up, I'm going to flatten it down, and I'm going to pull back. There's the first step. I'm going to load my brush again so that it's not too dry, and I'm going to go back the other direction. So I'm going to tickle it this way. I'm going to push down. I got to turn my paper, you guys. Sorry. I was trying to do it for your angle, but... And then I'm going to pull back. All right, and that's my leaf. Now, when I did my rainbow ones here, I changed colors on each side. So this one was purple and blue, and this one was orange and yellow. So let me show you what that looks like. I got to wash my brush really good in my dirty water. I'm going to dry it on my towel, and I'm going to rinse it in my clean water so I can go hydrate a pretty color over here. Let's do that blue and purple one. That's nice and dark, and it's easy for you to see on camera. Let's see, where's a good place? Right here? I'm used to spinning my paper a lot, you guys, so I don't know if I can do it without spinning it. Too much paint on that brush, I can tell. Here we go. So we're going to pull back, pull up. Kind of like a one-stroke leaf, right? Let's get a clean brush and grab some of this blue pretty color. All right, and then I'm going to turn my paper. Normally I wouldn't. Normally I'd reach my hand around and kind of make it at a funny angle, but I want to make sure you can see. So I'm going to turn my paper. Okay, and you can see, hopefully you can see, because the purple was wet, some of the blue touched that purple and it starts to kind of bleed and run together, but I also made sure to leave just a little bit of white in the middle. And I like it that way. I did it over here too, just leave a little bit of white. Watercolor is one of those things that really benefits from having paper showing through. Sorry, Miss Sarah. I'll get back with you in a minute. All right, so let's grab some orange because you know that's my favorite. So again, I had blue on my brush, so I had to make sure to clean it really good, and then I had to make sure I could use the clean water to hydrate this orange. All right, here we go. Let's do an orange one. So we're going to pull back and pull up. All right, and then see how I just kind of tap it while it's still wet? What I'm doing is I'm filling that space with some paint. Wash my brush really good, grab some clean water. let's go with green. There's a really great kind of bright green. Orange and green are not next to each other on the color wheel, but I like it anyway. So we're going to pull, we'll touch it right here, and then pull, leave a little white. I got to turn my brush, come to a point, kind of trail it off. Okay, you see how those start to come together? If I go right next to it, you lose that white in the middle, which is cool if you like that look. I prefer the little white stripe down the middle. It's almost like a highlight of that vein in the leaf, okay? All right, should we put it all together and see what it looks like when we start to put them on branches and things? Let me switch my paper. We're gonna do rainbow leaves and we're gonna paint them on this paper. I'm gonna back you up a little bit because you've seen the technique. So now I want you to see the composition as a whole. Sorry. I need like one of those like smooth like gimbal things. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like so it doesn't shake and nobody gets seasick watching my videos. I have a really cool overhead like tripod thing, but it's at the Flatwoods location because it kind of lives there for all the videos that we do in the video room. All right, so here's my palette. Back you up just a little bit more. My palette, my paper. You can kind of see the whole process. So let's see. Do I even have a pencil? I don't know. These, you guys, these are so fun to make. I don't want to use a pen. My art teacher would be so proud of me. I'm going to use paint to map out my, so Mrs. Funk always made me use cerulean blue to map out my painting. So we'll grab cerulean's a really light blue. So we'll grab a little light blue and let's just map out our painting here. So we'll do maybe a branch that comes from this side. Can you see that? You can, just a little bit. Okay. And then maybe a second branch that comes up. This is just my composition. Make sure we get it really light. You know how to make things light in watercolor? You know, in like pastel-y light. In your like acrylics, you would add white paint, right? And in like drawing, you vary the pressure. In watercolors, you make it lighter by adding more water. So the pigment ratio to water ratio is what determines the vibrancy of color. So if you have a lot of pigment and a little bit of water, you get a really, really vibrant color. And if you have a little bit of pigment and a lot of water, which is what we have here, we have these pastel-y colors. So let's do kind of in rainbow order and we'll work our way up these branches and see what we look like, okay? I'm gonna go with, this is the closest thing there is to true red here is actually kind of an orangey color. So I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna load my brush, but I'm also gonna grab pink. Now I mix right in my palette because I'm not sharing and I can do that. And it's really easy. Like if you don't like that, when you're done, you just grab your paper towel and just, it's still wet and blot it off and it's all clean and ready for the next person. If I was sharing, I wouldn't do that. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna make a leaf right here. This one's gonna be our first one in the rainbow. So I pull back, tap a little bit more pigment and a little bit more water. I wanna make sure it stays nice and wet while I'm working. Okay. And then we're going to go up here and we're going to grab that true kind of tangerine orange for the second side of that leaf. So every color that we do for these leaves are actually going to be next to each other in the rainbow. Okay. So there's our first rainbow leaf. Let's do the next one. So then we'll go orange to yellow. So I grab that orange. I load up my brush. Goes on the next branch. I want to make sure that stays kind of wet. So, whoops, see I dropped it. Want to see how to erase? Grab my paper towel. I'm going to blot off the extra. I'm going to grab my cleanish water because, of course, I already touched a dirty brush in there. I'm going to rub it on there, kind of hydrate it up. And then I'm going to blot it again. I can also use a dry brush to kind of soak it up. But since I've got my paper towels in my hand, we'll erase it that way. My brush just had way too much on it, you guys. That's why it did that. All right, let's grab some yellow. Here comes our yellow. Make sure I don't have too much on it. We'll touch the orange, flatten it out, pull back to a point. There's our next leaf. Can you see that so far? Let's see if I can get you closer without Facebook getting mad at me. They don't like when I turn my camera like, see, they don't like that when I turn it completely flat. It sends me an angry message and tells me that I need to not rotate my camera like that. All right, so now we go to the yellow. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of this. It's at the top here. It's like a goldenrod color. We'll flatten down and pull back. And then I'm going to use a light green. I've got lots of different color greens on this palette. I'm going to start with this kind of springy green and we'll move our way across. We'll go to a couple different greens. Again, touch the yellow, flatten down but leave a space. Now that's pretty light, which means I had a lot of water there and not a lot of pigment, but I can just take it, and reload and drop in. Okay, and if that's too much, watercolors, believe it or not, pretty forgiving. I dry my brush on my paper towel so it's really dry, and watch, I can use it like a sponge and it will soak up this color. Ready? I usually make sound effects for the kids. It goes like this. Isn't that cool? It works without sound effects too, but it's not nearly as entertaining. All right. Now let's do this really pretty green again. The same kind of spring grass green. We touch our stem. We're going to pull back. Okay, there's the bottom half of that leaf. And then I'm going to grab a different green. This one is, I was going to say more of a true green, but probably not. It's probably more like a viridian green. Touch it down there, pull it back. Kind of an emerald green maybe. Okay, the nice thing about the round brush is it's got this really pretty tip on it that makes it easy to kind of clean up your edges if you want. So like if you didn't quite get the point on the end of the leaf that you want, you can, even with a dry brush and the paint's wet, you kind of pull it back. All right, we'll grab that same emerald green, and this might be close to our last one before we turn the corner here. But I'm going to pull here, pull back, and we'll grab some pretty blue. This is my dark kind of royal blue here. All right, I'm going to grab my clean water. So I washed my brush. I got a little bit of clean water, and I'm just going to connect some of these leaves together while they're still a little bit wet. And that makes my stem kind of in a rainbow color, which is fun. Isn't that neat? All right, let's turn the corner here, and we'll go with that same blue that we just did. I'm going to turn my paper a little bit because otherwise my hand will go into my leaves, and I don't want that, right? All right, and I'm going to put my leaf right in the middle of these two leaves. So I don't want to put it right next to it, and I don't want to line it up with this one. I'm going to go right from the middle, flatten it out, come up, clean my brush because we're switching colors, and then I'm going to grab this royal purple color. And you would not have to do this in rainbow order if you do not want to. I just really enjoyed that this weekend, and I thought you might too. You also don't have to change colors on either side of the leaf. It looks cool to just have one color. All right. Let's go with the purple here. Wash my brush. And we're going to take the purple into some pink. And then we'll start back over again. All right. You guys have any questions so far? When's the last time you painted with watercolor paints? Do you get to do that very often? That one's a little bit pinkier than I wanted. So I'm going to go back in and grab some of that red. I'm going to kind of paint over the top of it. Make sure I got a good amount of red in there. Do you see how my red leaf didn't run? It didn't run into the stem before I get onto my orange. Well, no, let's do the orange real quick, and then I'll show you. Let's get that orange. That is a very saturated leaf. It's got a lot of pigment there. So I've dried my brush off and I'm just gonna lift up a little bit so it's not quite so, I want a little bit of variance, right? All right, here's what I was gonna tell you. I grabbed a brush with just a little bit of water on it and my stem has dried. So I'm gonna go in and make my stem again. That was the one I did in light blue. There. As long as that stays wet, the stem kind of comes, it forms when the leaves touch it because it just sends just a little bit of color down it. All right, let's switch it. Let's do this pumpkin-y orange just for fun. Here we go. Trail back, flatten out, come up, wash the brush. Make sure that I get some clean water before we go into yellow. Yellow more than anything. Otherwise, you get really muddied yellows. Okay. Let's do a green. So yellow and green is next. Touch the stem. Send a little bit of color down that stem. Wash the brush. Grab that spring green. So what could you do with rainbow leaves, you guys, huh? I think it's fun just to paint them, personally. But if you need more, they make really cute note cards, right? It's always fun to paint on note cards. It'd make really cute, like gift wrap, if you could figure it out, because you can cover the whole page, right, in this organic kind of pattern. See how I tapped that stem and it just poof, filled her up. There's a blank part right here in this stem, so I'm just going to tap it with a little bit of yellow. Let's flip her around, and I'm going to paint right here with a blue leaf. Well, green and blue. It's going to be green and blue. Here we go. I'm doing the turning, you guys, because I don't want to stick my hand in something that's wet. Mess up my picture. When you go back in with pigment, right? So I just tapped in a little bit more of that green to make it a little darker. That's called dropping in. So I'm dropping in case you want professional, fancy terminology. What you think? We're looking good so far? I feel like we need a little kind of like leaf bud right here. So I'm gonna, it may not work. It may look silly. I'm gonna do it anyway. I don't hate it. All right, so that is our composition so far. Let me turn it around. Let's see. Hi, how's everybody? Turning it around. You can see my lobby here in just a second, hopefully. Oh, there it is. There's the lobby. This way I can show you the picture. So that is our rainbow leaves so far. So you can kind of see what we got going on. I'll zoom in. See how they all bleed into that stem? The ones that are shiny are obviously still wet. That's how we do that rainbow leaf. So let's see if I can, maybe at a different angle, I'll show you. So this is that other stem that we drew. I always got to remember you're really close to me right now and I don't need to yell. Sorry guys, I talk pretty loud. So I've got plain water on my brush and I am just going to up the stem a little bit. All right, and then we'll paint a leaf. Let's start at the beginning again. So this is my red. Okay, I'm gonna flip her upside down a little bit. Well, no, that's not, because then I'll stick my hands in the other side. Let's see if I can get fancy. I'm gonna go this way. Sometimes you got to get creative with how you hold your brush. All right, so there's our red, right? It doesn't have a lot of pigment, kind of right here in this middle part. So I reload my brush and I tap in. I can also clean my brush. See, I cleaned it. right? And then I get some cleanish, not really clean now because I've been using it accidentally, cleanish water and just kind of tap in, make sure that kind of stays wet. I don't want it to dry before I paint the other side of that leaf. And then we'll grab some orange. I like this color. Load up my brush. Come back over. I'm going to pull backwards this time since it's kind of at a funny angle. So flatten it. Whoops. Come here, you. Pull back. Okay. My stem must not be wet there because if it was, that color should run the length of that. So wash my brush really good, grab some cleanish water, and let's see what we can do about that. There it goes. That's what we want. There, see? All that water there, it just gave it a pathway, someplace to go. All right, let's do another one. So we'll grab that orange. There's my orange, see? Turn that just a little bit. So we'll touch our stem, we'll flatten it out, we'll pull back, and kind of trail up, and then let's grab some pretty yellow. It's kind of funny holding the camera, you guys, doing this. Too much on my brush right now. If I set that down, it's gonna go, and it's gonna all plop out. I don't want that. So I'm gonna scrape some off into my well. That's better. And that you just get with practice, okay? I'm actually watching on camera, not on my paper. There we go. Pretty cool, huh? Let's do the yellow one and then we'll turn it around. Oops, too much on my brush. See how I splattered some there? Yellow is really easy to lift off though. So I grab my paper towels, just kind of blot it. And if that bothers you, you grab your clean water, just kind of rub it, let it kind of rehydrate a second, and then we'll just blot it off. And you can do that over and over and over again. Just want to be gentle to your paper so you don't damage it. But it works really well. You know, that's why we use a higher quality watercolor paper, is because it can take it. Cool? Hang on, just a sec. Turn you back around. You guys doing okay over there? You having fun watching? You want to see me finish? I can paint faster if I don't have to hold the camera. So let me see if I can finish this for you. And you can watch. Sound good? I'll try to entertain you with my talking. Whoops. No. I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing though. Sometimes I like to turn my paper lots of different directions, so you kind of have to just keep up. So that's that one. Go the other way. Wash the brush, clean water. All right, see how that one doesn't, it doesn't move the stem. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a stem. Connect it to what's going on. And then I'm going to drop in a little bit more color, just so it's full. And then we'll grab our second green. These have such great colors, you guys. Too much on my brush, I can tell. Go wipe that off. All right, and then we'll grab the blue. Can you still see? I'll make sure I keep it so that you can see it. My painting's moving. There it goes. Go with blue, and we might end this one on the purple, so that way turn around and come back with the colors. wash my brush, grab some clean water, let's connect these up. If you want really skinny lines with your brushes, you have to apply very little pressure. Some people find it easier if they try to stand the brush up, so it's just the tip is on there. It's really just whatever trick you can figure out. Drop a little color in there. There we go. That might be a little bit dark, so I'm gonna dry my brush off really good, and then I'm gonna use my brush like a sponge, and I'm gonna soak up a little bit right there. Okay, and we'll do just the other side of this leaf, and then or this stem, and we'll call it good. Even though I could really fill this whole thing up if you know, if I had the time. There's one purple leaf. Let's use a different purple just for fun, just to keep it interesting and not so predictable. It's kind of a lavender purple. Drop a little bit of that in. And then we'll go from that lavender purple to a little bit of pink. And then some pink. I love doing leaves, you guys, because they're so forgiving, right? You can't mess this up. There are all sorts of leaf shapes in leaf shapes. Get that right. Leaf shapes in nature, right? They all look different. Who's to say there's not a leaf that looks like that shape? So you can't mess this up. You can see I've kind of switched some of my colors just to keep it interesting. I've done a couple hot pinks. We're going to switch to some orange as we get to the bottom here. And then some yellow. If you are just tuning in, we are painting rainbow watercolor leaves with just a really basic Artist Loft watercolor set from Michaels. We learned how to vary our brush and make this pressure on our brush and make these kind of two-stroke leaves. And the way they make them a rainbow is we're changing the color in the middle of the leaf. So each of the strokes is a different color, and they all kind of blend together, and they make these really pretty rainbows. I did one. I'm gonna call that good. I should probably stop. I did one the other night that instead of changing the leaves as I went, I just had two colors, and the whole plant was like blue and purple as opposed to being a rainbow. So that is it. How fun is that? I would totally lift it up and show it to you, but it's watercolor, and you can't do that. If you lift them up, they all run together, right? But these are our watercolor leaves tutorial that we did. So I hope you get to try it out at home and have some fun with this. If you want to learn more watercolors, my grown-up artists out there, if you want to do, hang on, there you are. If you want to do more watercolors with me this summer, we do have some select Friday night classes. One of them's coming up this week, today's Monday. One of them's coming up this week, and we're doing a combination of basic, simple watercolors like this and lettering, and it's a 90-minute class for $20. So I think there's one this week, and then there's two in July. So if you're interested and you're local, we'd love to have you join for that. If you can't find the registration link, give me a comment or a private message or email. If you really have to, you can call me. Otherwise, send me a message and I'll help you find that, and you can come and we can play in watercolors. If you are not local, try this out at home and send me a picture. If you have any trouble, send me a message so I can help you with it, okay? Other than that, that's all I got for you today. I know Miss Sarah is with you tomorrow and she's got something fun planned for you, all right? Have a wonderful rest of your Monday, and I'll chat with you guys soon. Missed the button.